Why did the room go quiet the moment she took the empty chair at the end of the table? Not the respectful kind of quiet. The kind that sharpens. The kind that weighs. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. Screens hummed softly along the wall, maps frozen mid-satellite sweep. Men in faded uniforms leaned back in their chairs, boots crossed, arms loose, comfortable. Familiar, belonging. She didn't belong, not to them, not yet. Her name sat on the roster in thin black text, but no one said it out loud. They rarely did. She was the attachment, the pilot, the transfer, anything but who she actually was. She placed her notebook down carefully as if noise itself might betray her. Blue ink, sharp pen, everything squared, everything controlled. Someone snorted from across the table. Didn't know this op came with a diversity add-on. A few chuckles, low, casual, practiced. She didn't look up. Experience had taught her something early on. Reactions fed men like this. Silence starved them. The speaker was a Navy SEAL with a beard too perfect for a deployment and eyes that had never learned how to apologize. His call sign was Archer. He wore it like a crown. He leaned back, arms behind his head, studying her like a glitch in the system. "You even flown hot insertion before?" he asked, not curious, amused. She met his eyes then, calm still. "Yes." That was all. Archer smiled wider, cute. The word landed wrong, too light for the weight behind it. The commanding officer cleared his throat and brought the room back to order. The mission rolled forward, coordinates, timelines, threat assessments. A high-value target buried deep in hostile territory. One shot, one chance, no noise. A sniper insertion followed by immediate aerial extraction. Precision mattered, timing mattered more. And suddenly, all eyes shifted to her. The pilot. "She'll be flying us in," the co said, neutral, professional. Low altitude, terrain masking night. Archer tilted his head. "She." A beat. Then softer, sharper. "No offense, sir, but we've lost men trusting flights to less than tested hands." Less than tested. She felt it then, that familiar tightening behind the ribs, not anger, something colder, older. Memory. A desert wind screaming through a shattered canopy. Warning lights blinking red like panicked eyes. Her co-pilot's voice, steady until it was. She exhaled slowly. "I've logged more night insertions than anyone on this roster," she said, voice even, "including 2 in this region." Archer laughed. "On simulators." She didn't answer. Not because she couldn't. Because she knew something they didn't. And she wasn't ready to give it to them yet. The briefing ended without resolution. Chairs scraped, voices rose, plans were argued, gear was checked. No one spoke to her on the way out. She welcomed the quiet. Outside, the night had already begun to cool. The flight line stretched long and dim, aircraft resting like sleeping animals. She walked toward her bird alone, boots echoing against concrete. This was where things made sense. She ran a hand along the fuselage, metal cold beneath her fingers. Familiar, honest, aircraft didn't lie. They responded to skill, not perception. Inside the cockpit, she sat and closed her eyes for just a moment. Not to pray. To remember. Her father's voice, calm and patient, teaching her how to read the sky before instruments ever could. Her mother's hands, shaking slightly as she pinned on her wings. The letter that came years later, folded too many times, stained at the edges. She opened her eyes. The past stayed where it belonged. Hours later, the mission launched. No dramatic speeches, no music, just the whine of engines and the quiet click of safety checks. Archer boarded last. He paused at the cockpit entrance, looking at her like a man stepping into an elevator he didn't trust. "Try not to get us killed," he said lightly. She didn't look back. The aircraft lifted into the night. Below them, the world dissolved into shadow and geometry, ridges, valleys, the faint glow of distant settlements. She flew low, lower than doctrine recommended, terrain hugging, invisible. Archer's laughter had faded. The cabin was silent now. Wind buffeted the hull. Warning systems murmured. She adjusted without thinking. Small corrections, muscle memory. This was the part she loved. The edge, the focus, the way fear sharpened instead of consumed. A sudden alarm blinked. Missile lock. Archer's voice snapped through the intercom. We've got tone. She didn't swear, didn't flinch. She banked hard, dropped altitude, cut power just enough to disappear into the valley's shadow. Flares deployed in a precise pattern, not panic. Design. The lock broke. Silence returned. No one cheered. No one spoke. They landed exactly on time. The team disembarked fast, melting into darkness. Archer paused at the ramp, looking back at her. For the first time, there was no humor in his eyes. "Clean flying," he said. She nodded once. That was enough. Minutes stretched. Then gunfire, distant, controlled. She monitored every frequency, every heartbeat, waiting. This was always the hardest part. Waiting to see if skill was enough. The extraction call came late, too late. "Pilot," Archer's voice crackled, different now, tighter. "We're compromised, LZ is hot." She swallowed. "Alternate." A pause. "No." She looked at the fuel gauge, the terrain, the wind. She thought of the letter again. Then she made a choice. "I'm coming in anyway." Silence on the line. Then quietly, "Copy." The aircraft roared back toward the fire. Tracer rounds stitched the air. She flew straight into them. Not reckless. Committed. She held the line, held the altitude, held her breath. The team boarded under fire. One man limped, another carried him. Blood streaked the ramp. She lifted off with inches to spare. Only when they were clear did she realize her hands were shaking. Archer collapsed into a seat, chest heaving. He looked at her through the cockpit glass. Something had shifted. He keyed the intercom. "I was wrong," he said. "No excuses, no jokes. About you." She didn't respond. The aircraft disappeared into the night, carrying secrets, scars, and a silence that felt earned. But the real story, the one that explained everything, hadn't been told yet. Not even close. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply waits. Why did Archer keep replaying the flight in his head, frame by frame, as if something about it refused to settle? The aircraft touched down miles away from the hot zone, engines finally spooling down into a low, exhausted whine. Night pressed in from every direction, thick and indifferent. The men disembarked slowly now. No urgency left, just wait. She stayed in her seat longer than necessary. Hands still on the controls. Breathing steady. Eyes forward. That was how she always ended missions, by not moving, by letting the world come back on its own terms. Behind her, boots hit the ground. Voices murmured. A medic swore softly as he guided the wounded operator toward the lights of the temporary field station. Archer lingered near the ramp. He hadn't meant to. His body just refused to follow the others. He watched her through the cockpit glass. She hadn't turned around once since landing. Most pilots would have, looking for confirmation, for approval, for relief. She didn't need it. That unsettled him more than the missile lock ever had. He finally stepped inside the aircraft, the metal echoing beneath his boots. "You always fly that low?" he asked, trying to sound casual, normal. She didn't answer right away. Then, without looking back, "Only when the terrain lies." Archer frowned. "Terrain doesn't lie." She unstrapped and stood, movements economical, precise. "It does if you listen to the map instead of the wind." She passed him on the way out. And just like that, the conversation was over. He stood there a moment longer, jaw tight, realizing something uncomfortable. She hadn't flown to impress them. She'd flown to survive. And that difference mattered. The debrief happened before dawn. A canvas tent, folding chairs, faces hollowed out by fatigue. The co spoke. The mission was labeled a success, target neutralized, minimal casualties, words that looked clean on paper. Archer barely heard them. He kept watching her. She sat apart again, helmet at her feet, flight suit streaked with dust and oil. A faint smear of blood on her sleeve that didn't belong to her. Ignored again. When the co asked for flight feedback, Archer surprised himself. "Pilot saved our asses," he said, clear, loud. A few heads turned. "She flew through conditions I wouldn't have attempted," he continued. "Didn't hesitate, didn't overcorrect. She knew exactly where we were even when we didn't." Silence followed. The co nodded once, noted. She didn't react. Didn't look up. Didn't smile. Didn't say thank you. That bothered Archer more than the earlier mockery. After the debrief, he caught up to her outside. "Hey," he said, softer now, less armor. "You got a name?" She stopped walking. Just for a second. Then, yes. He waited. She looked at him then, eyes sharp but tired. "And if you need it," she added, "you'll hear it on the radio." Then she walked away. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Not for Archer. And not for her. She lay on her cot staring at the canvas ceiling as the bass settled into its half-sleep rhythm. Generators humming. Distant laughter. Someone coughing in the dark. Her mind drifted where she tried not to let it go. To another night. Another aircraft. Another team. Years ago. Back when her call sign had been spoken with pride instead of doubt. Back when she trusted someone enough to fly just a little higher. The memory arrived uninvited. A storm had rolled in faster than predicted. Mountain clouds swallowing visibility. Her co-pilot, young, brilliant, too eager, had suggested climbing above it. She'd hesitated. Just long enough. They never cleared the cloud ceiling. Never saw the ridge until it was there. She remembered the sound most of all. Metal screaming. She survived. He didn't. The report blamed weather, equipment, bad luck. But she knew the truth lived somewhere quieter. In hesitation. In doubt. In the moment she let someone else's confidence override her own. She hadn't flown the same since. Lower. Closer. Alone. By morning the base buzzed with a new energy. Another op was coming together. Different region, different threat, same pattern. This time, no one questioned who the pilot would be. But acceptance didn't feel like victory. It felt temporary. During pre-flight checks, Archer approached again, more cautious now, like a man walking across thin ice. "You fly like someone who's lost people," he said quietly. She froze. Just slightly. Then resumed checking a panel. "Everyone here has." "Not like that," he replied. She exhaled through her nose. "Careful, SEAL. You're getting close to asking questions." He nodded, fair. They stood in silence a moment, the aircraft looming beside them. "I shouldn't have mocked you," he said finally. "Back there in the briefing." She didn't look up. "No, you shouldn't have." The bluntness caught him off guard. "But you did," she continued, "and that told me exactly what I needed to know." "Which is?" "That if things went wrong," she said, eyes finally meeting his, "I'd have to be right, perfect, because forgiveness wouldn't come as easily as doubt." Something in her voice made his throat tighten. "I won't do that again," he said. She studied him for a long moment, measuring, weighing. "Good," she replied, because next time I might not be flying you out. That night's mission was quieter, no alarms, no chaos. But tension lingered beneath every breath. On insertion, she noticed Archer watching her hands on the controls, steady, relaxed, precise. Not judging this time. Learning. As they disappeared into the darkness, she felt something unfamiliar creep in alongside the fear. Trust. It scared her more than any missile ever had. Hours later, as dawn threatened the horizon, the team returned intact. No wounds, no losses. A small victory. As they lifted off, Archer's voice came through the intercom one last time. "Pilot," he said, "whatever you lost, they'd be proud of how you fly now." Her grip tightened. Just slightly. She didn't answer. The aircraft climbed into the thinning dark, leaving behind dust, footprints, and assumptions that no longer held. Below them, the land softened in the early light. Above them, the sky waited. And for the first time in a long while, she wondered, not if she deserved to be there, but how long she'd been punishing herself for surviving. Some wounds don't bleed. They teach you how to fly. Why did the silence after a clean mission feel heavier than the firefight itself? The aircraft cut through the thinning night, rotors steady, horizon slowly bleeding from black into gray. Dawn crept in like it always did, quiet, indifferent, unconcerned with what had almost happened hours before. She kept her eyes forward. That was becoming a habit. Below them, the terrain softened, shadows retreating into valleys and folds of earth that looked harmless in daylight. It irritated her, that lie. Land that pretended innocence once the danger passed. Behind her, the team settled into that strange post-mission stillness. No jokes yet, no bravado, just men sitting with their thoughts, hands resting on rifles they hadn't needed to fire. Archer watched her again. Not openly this time. He noticed the way she breathed, slow, measured. The way her fingers rested on the controls like they belonged there, not gripping, not tentative. The way she listened to the aircraft instead of staring at instruments. Like it was alive. He'd flown with pilots before, dozens of them. None like her. When they landed, the sunrise finally broke free of the horizon, washing the base in pale gold. The kind of light that made everything look forgiving. Temporary mercy. She powered down the engines and sat still. Again. Archer waited for her to stand. She didn't. "You always do that?" he asked from behind her. She didn't turn. "Do what?" "Stay seated like you're listening for something." She considered the question longer than it deserved. "Sometimes," she said, "you don't know if you've really landed until you stop moving." He absorbed that, nodded. The team disembarked, gear clinked, boots scraped, life resumed. She stayed behind a moment longer, then finally stood, shoulders rolling once as if shaking off invisible weight. Outside, the base was waking up, radios crackled, engines coughed to life. Somewhere, someone laughed too loud. She walked past it all like a ghost, moving through a world she didn't quite belong to anymore. Later that day, the co called her in. A small office, a battered desk, coffee gone cold. "You flew well," he said without preamble. She nodded. Praise was a currency she no longer spent. "There's another operation coming," he continued. "High risk, multi-phase, they want you on it." She waited. "There's a complication," he added. There always was. "The sniper assigned requested a pilot change," he said carefully. "Cited concerns." Her jaw tightened. "Experience?" she asked flatly. "Compatibility," the co replied. She exhaled, slow, controlled. "Denied?" she asked. The co studied her a moment. "I denied it." Something flickered behind her eyes. Not relief, something closer to exhaustion. "He's good," the co added, "but he's young, he hasn't lost anyone," she finished. The co didn't argue. They all learn eventually, he said. She stood. If that's all, sir. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you don't owe this place anything. She paused. Yes, she replied without looking back. I do. The sniper arrived that evening. Young, lean, quiet in the way that suggested too much thinking. His hands shook just slightly when he checked his rifle, enough to notice, not enough to call out. He introduced himself with a nod. Evan, he said. She nodded back, pilot. He blinked. That's it. That's enough, she replied. They flew that night under a moonless sky. Long insertion, narrow canyon, winds unpredictable. Evan sat strapped in near the ramp, eyes closed, breathing shallow. Archer sat across from him, watching. First reel up, Archer asked. Evan nodded, first where someone might not come back. Archer glanced toward the cockpit. Then you're flying with the right person, he said. She heard that. Didn't react. As they descended, turbulence rocked the aircraft hard. Evan's breath hitched. She adjusted without hesitation, reading the wind off the canyon walls, trusting instinct over instrumentation. Her mind slipped into that familiar narrowing. Nothing existed but airspeed, altitude, sound. And memory. Her co-pilot's voice again, younger than Evan, same confidence, same faith. Don't hesitate. She pushed the thought away. They touched down clean. Evan disappeared into the darkness with the others. Then came the wait. Minutes stretched. Then hours. Wind rattled the hull. The night grew colder. She monitored feeds, heart steady, jaw tight. A distant shot echoed through the canyon. Then another. Archer stiffened. Her hand hovered over the controls. The radio crackled. Contact, Evan's voice whispered, strained, target moving. Silence. Then gunfire, close, too close. Her breath slowed. Extraction window shrinking, Archer said. I know, she replied. A pause. Then Evan again, louder, panicked. I can't get a clear shot. She closed her eyes for half a second. Then opened them. Breathe, she said into the mic. Count with me. What? Evan whispered. Breathe, she repeated. In, out. He obeyed. She could hear it, shaky, uneven. Listen to the wind, she continued. It's moving left to right, same as earlier. How do you? Trust me, she said. You already adjusted for it once. Silence. Then one shot. Clean. The radio crackled. Target down, Evan said, voice trembling. I did it. She allowed herself one breath. Then reality returned. Move, she said, now. Extraction was chaos. Shots rang out. A man stumbled. Evan nearly fell climbing the ramp. She lifted off under fire, aircraft shuddering as rounds struck metal. But they cleared the canyon. Alive. Back at base, Evan sat alone on a crate, hands shaking violently now. She approached quietly. You did well, she said. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. I almost froze. But you didn't. He swallowed. You stayed calm. She nodded. So did you. He hesitated. How do you do it? Fly like nothing touches you. She studied him a moment. Everything touches me, she said. I just don't let it decide. Evan nodded, words sinking in deeper than he realized. Later, Archer found her on the edge of the flight line, watching the stars emerge. You saved him, he said. She shook her head. He saved himself. Archer leaned against a crate beside her. You ever think about stopping? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Then, every time someone comes back alive. He frowned. That seems backwards. She looked at the sky. Maybe, she said, But survival has a way of asking questions you're not ready to answer. The night wrapped around them again, and somewhere deep inside her, a quiet truth stirred, uncomfortable and unavoidable. She wasn't just flying missions anymore. She was teaching others how not to break the way she had. Some lessons are learned in fire. Others are learned in silence. And both leave marks that never quite fade. Why did the base feel different the next morning, even though nothing had changed? She walked through the narrow metal corridors, boots echoing against cold steel. Morning light slanted in through small windows, cutting lines across the concrete floor. The mess hall buzzed with men drinking coffee and exchanging tired grins, but her presence barely registered. She had long since stopped expecting acknowledgement. A few men glanced her way, Archer among them. He didn't nod this time, not yet, just watched, lips pressed together as if he were trying to decide what to say and whether it mattered. Her eyes swept over the room. Everything smelled the same: reheated eggs, burnt toast, and lingering motor oil from the flight line. Familiar smells, neutral, indifferent. The debrief from the previous night's mission lingered in her mind like static. She had kept her hands steady, her breathing calm, but she remembered every second. Every shot fired, every whisper of panic, every choice she had made, and the weight of all the lives that had depended on them. Evan approached her quietly as she stood by the railing, overlooking the training grounds. His shoulders were tense, hands fidgeting, the kind of nervous energy she recognized all too well. "I can't stop thinking about last night," he admitted. "I mean, I saw what you did in the aircraft, how you stayed calm, how you didn't hesitate. How do you do that?" She looked at him for a long moment. His youth, his fear, and his earnestness reminded her of herself years ago, before the mistakes, before the losses. "I don't do it for me," she said softly. "I do it because someone has to, because hesitation can cost lives." Evan nodded slowly. "But doesn't it haunt you, the decisions, the choices?" Her jaw tightened slightly. A shadow crossed her face. "Every day, but that's the point. You survive by keeping moving, by remembering but not letting it stop you. You accept it, you carry it, and then you keep going." She turned and walked down the stairs, boots echoing on the metal treads. The wind had picked up, scattering dust across the courtyard. She paused at the edge, eyes scanning the distant mountains, their jagged peaks glowing softly in the early light. The beauty of it was cruel, perfect terrain for mistakes. Archer approached from behind, hands in pockets, careful not to startle her. He didn't speak immediately. Sometimes, he realized, words were inadequate. Finally, he asked, "Do you ever feel like it's too much?" She considered him briefly. "Every mission, every flight, every choice." He nodded. "And yet you keep going." "Yes," she said, turning to face him, her blue flight suit catching the soft glow of sunrise. "Because stopping isn't an option, not for me, not for them, and sometimes not even for myself." The next operation required a different approach: coordination with ground intelligence, deeper reconnaissance, and tighter timelines. Every detail mattered. She reviewed maps, flight paths, and contingency plans meticulously, losing herself in the precision that kept chaos at bay. Evan shadowed her, trying to keep pace. She noticed him studying everything, absorbing every movement, every check, every subtle adjustment. It wasn't just training, it was survival. During the pre-flight checks, Archer joined her at the aircraft. He lingered, as if weighing the right words to bridge the distance between respect and camaraderie. "You ever tell anyone about the missions before last?" he asked cautiously. "About your past?" She looked at him unflinching. "Some stories aren't for sharing, not yet." He didn't press. Not now. Some truths, he realized, demanded respect rather than curiosity. As they prepared for takeoff, the sun finally broke over the horizon. The light glinted off the rotor blades, casting elongated shadows across the tarmac. She climbed into the cockpit, Evan taking his position beside her, a mix of tension and determination on his face. The aircraft lifted smoothly, cutting through the morning haze. Below them, the mountains sprawled endlessly, unforgiving yet breathtaking. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and dust, grounding her, reminding her why every choice mattered. The insertion zone was distant. Enemy activity reported minimal but unpredictable. She guided the aircraft with steady hands, anticipating gusts, terrain shifts, and subtle atmospheric changes. Evan adjusted instinctively, learning from her calm, controlled commands. Suddenly, a report crackled over the radio. Movement, unidentified, bearing 625. She adjusted the aircraft slightly, eyes narrowing as she studied the shifting shadows below. Every instinct, every memory of past missions, every ounce of training told her to remain calm, precise, and vigilant. Minutes stretched. Hearts raced silently in the cabin. Archer sat tensely, watching her hands move with exacting precision, the hum of the engines filling the gaps where fear could have crept in. Target confirmed, Evan whispered after a tense pause, voice trembling slightly. She nodded once, hold steady. The ground team moved in. Extraction planned, time critical, any hesitation could compromise everything. She guided them to the drop zone. Every second mattered. Every movement counted. When the team disembarked safely, she held position, monitoring the perimeter and adjusting for subtle changes in wind and terrain. Then came the report, mission complete, target neutralized, no casualties. Relief didn't wash over her. She exhaled softly, recognizing that survival never came with celebration. It came with acknowledgement, fleeting and quiet. Back at base, the team disembarked. Evan approached her again, a mix of awe and uncertainty on his face. You kept us alive," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She studied him quietly. "You did too. You learned to breathe when it mattered." The silence afterward was heavy but comfortable. Words were unnecessary. Actions had spoken louder. Archer found her later, leaning against the side of the aircraft, watching the sunset paint the mountains in deep orange and red. "You're something else," he admitted quietly. She didn't smile, didn't look at him, she simply nodded. "Sometimes," she said softly, voice barely audible over the wind, "the mission isn't about being a hero. It's about being necessary." He absorbed that. He didn't argue, not now. As the night fell, the base settled into quiet routines. Engines hummed, radios crackled, and distant laughter echoed faintly. She stood alone, watching the stars emerge, contemplating the weight of every choice she had made and every life she had touched. Some lessons were learned in fire, some in silence, and the mark they left was permanent. Why did the past sneak up on her when she least expected it? She was alone in the quiet of the base hangar, running final checks on the aircraft. The hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed unusually loud, echoing against the walls. Each bolt, each lever, each dial reminded her that she had survived, that she had made it this far. But survival had its own weight, and she felt it pressing down tonight heavier than ever. A photo pinned to the side of the cockpit caught her eye, faded edges curled slightly. It was from years ago, her first deployment before the losses, before the missions that left permanent shadows. She stared at it longer than she intended. A younger version of herself smiling alongside her co-pilot, the one she'd lost. The memory hit her chest like a sudden gust of wind. She swallowed. Memories of that stormed night returned. The roaring winds, the deafening alarms, the panic that had threatened to overtake her. The flight controls had been slick with rain, the instruments screaming conflicting warnings, and she had had to make a choice in a split second, stay the course or climb and risk everything. She had chosen, but not without cost. The co-pilot had not survived. Her fingers brushed the photograph. "I didn't fail you," she whispered, though she knew the words would never reach him. The photograph was silent, indifferent, like the mountains she had flown over countless times. The quiet was broken by footsteps. Evan approached, cautious, as if stepping into a room holding secrets he wasn't meant to see. "Miss," his voice was hesitant. She looked up, forcing herself back into the present. "Pilot," she said. I didn't know," he said, nodding toward the photograph. "I didn't realize." She exhaled slowly. "Most people don't, and that's okay. You weren't there." He hesitated, eyes searching hers. "Do you ever stop thinking about it, about him?" Her gaze returned to the photograph. "Every time I fly," she admitted softly. "Every time I see a young operator learning too fast, trusting too much, I remember. And I adjust. I do my best to make sure history doesn't repeat itself." Evan swallowed. "That's incredible and terrifying." She gave a small, bitter smile. "It has to be." The next mission loomed. A longer insertion, more variables, higher stakes. She knew the team relied on her precision, on her calm under pressure. The responsibility was heavy but familiar. It was a burden she had carried for years. As they approached the aircraft, Archer was waiting. His expression was unreadable. He had watched her grow silently, judged her in brief flashes, then adjusted. Something between respect and disbelief. "You ready?" he asked, voice quieter than usual. She nodded, "Always." The flight took them over jagged terrain, low and careful. Night had fallen, darkness folding in on itself like a living thing. Every shadow could hide danger. Every gust of wind was a test. She glanced at Evan, watching his hands grip the side of the cabin. He was tense but learning, observing, trusting. Suddenly the comms lit up. "Multiple hostiles sighted. Bearing 318. Movement is erratic." Her jaw tightened. "Hold steady," she said. "Don't anticipate, react." Archer's voice cut in, sharper than usual. "It's getting close, pilot." She adjusted the controls subtly, guiding the aircraft with precision. The wind screamed, rotors chopping air, but her focus never wavered. Each movement was calculated, each decision deliberate. Then came the shot. A round traced past them, close enough to sing against the metal hull. She banked hard, instinct overriding calculation, as Evan's hand brushed hers for balance. "Focus," she whispered. "Everything else doesn't matter." The team disembarked under cover, moving swiftly. She held the aircraft steady, monitoring the perimeter. Time stretched. Moments that felt eternal, suspended between life and death. The target was neutralized with minimal casualties. The extraction window tight, but she maneuvered the aircraft perfectly, weaving through canyons and avoiding detection. Back at base, she disembarked quietly. The adrenaline lingered in her veins, but she hid it well. The team celebrated their success, but she stood slightly apart, watching. Archer approached again, his expression softened. "You've changed a lot," he said, "since the first time we flew together." She didn't answer immediately. She remembered the young co-pilot, the mistakes, the cost of hesitation. "Not changed," she said finally. "Refined, sharpened, every choice counts." Evan came up beside her. "I don't think I'd have made it without you," he admitted. She looked at him, her face calm but eyes carrying depth. "You did it. I just made sure you could." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the base. She stood silently, watching the colors bleed across the sky. The weight of her past, the cost of her decisions, the burden of responsibility, it all lingered, but she accepted it. Sometimes survival isn't about glory. Sometimes it's about quiet endurance. And sometimes it's about teaching others to endure as well. The night wrapped around the base like a protective shroud. Engines hummed softly in the distance. Distant laughter echoed faintly, and she remained where she was, alone with the sky, the wind, and the silent ghosts of her past. Some losses never heal. Some lessons never fade. But resilience persists. And for her, that was enough. Why did the morning feel heavier than the night, even though the sun had barely risen? She moved along the flight line, boots hitting concrete with careful rhythm. The base was waking slowly, engines coughing, distant radios chattering, men exchanging brief, clipped words. But she felt detached, almost as if she were watching through someone else's eyes. Her blue flight suit caught the first hints of sunlight, the fabric slightly dusty from the last insertion. She ran a hand along the aircraft's fuselage, tracing scratches and scuffs like old scars. Every mark told a story: survival, mistakes, victories. And every story reminded her of why she couldn't falter, not even for a second. Archer approached silently. This time no jokes, no smirks, just observation. His eyes lingered on her movements, nodding precision, calm, and something else, something that unsettled him. "You never look tired," he said finally, almost as if testing her. She didn't reply immediately. She never answered on instinct. She measured her words, her timing. Tired doesn't matter, focus does. He studied her for a long moment, realizing that the truth in her words carried weight he hadn't encountered before. Most people spoke focus. She embodied it. The next mission required insertion deep behind hostile lines, coordinated with both ground intelligence and a small sniper team. Every detail mattered. One wrong move could compromise everyone. She reviewed maps meticulously, committing routes, altitudes, wind currents, and landing zones to memory. Every contour, every shadow, every possible hiding spot for an enemy was logged in her mind. Evan shadowed her, notebook in hand, attempting to absorb every detail, every movement, every check she performed. He flinched at minor turbulence during pre-flight checks, but she barely noticed. Her calmness acted as a buffer, an anchor against the rising tension. As they approached the aircraft, Archer joined her. He lingered near the side, unsure whether to speak or just observe. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked cautiously, "walking away from all this?" She paused, a small, controlled breath. "Every day," she admitted, "but leaving isn't the same as surviving." He nodded. "I see that now." The flight took them low over jagged terrain. Night had already fallen, folding over the mountains like a living thing. Below, shadows shifted unpredictably. She guided the aircraft with steady hands, reading the wind and terrain as if they were an extension of herself. Evan sat tensely beside her, observing every subtle movement, every adjustment. He was learning quickly, absorbing not just technique but mindset. Then radio chatter cut through the hum of the engines. Hostile movement detected, bearing 327, multiple contacts. Her jaw tightened. "Hold steady," she commanded. "Do not anticipate, react." Archer's voice cracked through the intercom, sharper than usual. "They're closing fast." She adjusted the aircraft with precise movements, anticipating gusts and shifts in air currents. Each decision had to be exact. Any hesitation could be fatal. A single tracer round flew past them, singing against the metal fuselage. She banked hard, instinct overriding calculation, Evan gripping the cabin wall to stabilize himself. "Focus," she whispered. "Everything else is irrelevant." The ground team moved with speed and precision, following the plan she had overseen for hours. Extraction points were calculated, contingencies accounted for. Every second mattered. Target neutralization occurred with minimal casualties. She guided the team to the pickup point, adjusting altitude and speed to avoid detection. The extraction window was narrow, but she maneuvered flawlessly. Back at base, the team disembarked, the adrenaline still fresh in their veins. Evan approached her, his hands shaking slightly. You kept us alive," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. She studied him for a long moment. "You did it. I only made sure you could." Archer appeared behind them, leaning against the aircraft. His expression softened. "You've changed since the first flight I saw you on. The way you handle this, it's something else." She shook her head slightly. "Not changed," she said calmly. "Refined, sharpened, every choice counts." The sun had nearly risen over the horizon, casting gold and red across the mountains. She stood silently, observing the landscape she had flown through countless times. Every mission, every decision, every life saved or lost, it all rested on the edge of her control. Some lessons are learned in chaos, some in quiet reflection, some linger, shaping who you become. She exhaled, letting the tension slip from her shoulders, even if only briefly. The wind whispered across the base, distant engines hummed, and the sky glowed with the light of a new day. She remained on the tarmac, watching the world awaken, carrying the ghosts of her past missions and the weight of her responsibilities. Resilience was quiet, unseen, unyielding. And for her, that was enough.